Hi, Nathan Pierce here. I am going to be presenting some education statistics that we have recently been pulling together to provide information in response to a lot of questions about the number of students homeschooling in California. So I'm just going to be going through that information. So this year and last year, we have seen an increase in the number of students in small private schools, the schools with 5 or fewer students, which is generally considered to be safe to assume these are all homeschool families. And so what we're looking at here in this chart is the private school affidavit filings by year for the 18-19 school year, the 19-20 school year, and the 2021 school year. I'm limiting the data for this presentation to the last 3 years. This starts before COVID. The 19-20 year ended up with the COVID shutdowns of schools in the middle of the second semester of that year. And then the 2021 year is well into COVID and ending earlier this year. So this chart shows that in the 18-19 school year, we had 14,548 schools listed that filed affidavits in that school year. And then in 19-20, we had 22,433 affidavits filed. And in 2021, we had 34,782 affidavits filed. So this chart shows affidavits filed. It doesn't show the number of students, but it shows the affidavits filed. So the families that chose to file an affidavit are listed here. And then the 6 or more filings includes families that have more than 5 children that are school age, but it also includes all the campus schools. So those numbers stayed very similar through these 3 time periods. So let's look at the next chart. This graph shows the same information, but just with bars, so you can compare the 18-19 school year, the number of affidavits. Again, this is not number of students, this is number of affidavits. Green represents the 5 or fewer affidavits, and the 6 or more schools are represented by the blue. Now we're going to look at enrollment of these two sizes of private schools. So the 5 or fewer enrollment and the 6 or more enrollment over the 3-year period. You'll see again the numbers for the 6 or more schools. That enrollment actually decreased a bit both years, but the 5 or fewer enrollment increased significantly. So let's take a look at the next graph that kind of shows clearly what's going on there. This is the enrollment. This is private school enrollment. 5 or fewer is the green. There's generally fewer students in the 5 or fewer schools, but it did increase significantly as far as percentage goes. And then the 6 or more schools, the campus schools, those decreased similarly actually to the increase in the 5 or fewer enrollment. Then here we have a chart that actually shows the number of schools, including the private schools, the 5 or fewer schools, the 6 or more schools, and the public schools and public charter schools. And you'll see here that the top half of here, we've already reviewed these numbers, but the lower half, the public and charter numbers, has also decreased over the last 2 years. The traditional public school number of schools or school sites actually increased in 1920, but then decreased significantly in 2021. So this is something to be keeping an eye on, because as that number decreases of the public school enrollment, those public schools do see, as far as both enrollment and schools. So far here we're looking at schools. This next batch of numbers represents the number of students, and we'll go to this bar graph that helps you see specifically the comparison between the small schools, the private schools, the small private schools, the larger private schools, then your public schools, which has most of the students in the state, and then the charter schools. This is enrollment here. This is number of students. This isn't just the number of schools. This is actually the number of students. So you'll see here in this public school section that there was a slight decrease in 1920 in public schools, in public school enrollment, but there was a significant decrease. Sorry, there was a slight decrease from 1819 to 1920 in public schools, traditional public schools. There was a more significant decrease in enrollment between 1920 and 2021. So that's significant. Then I have some numbers on breaking this out by actual grade in the schools. So you can look at this in more detail, but this helps. This graph here shows, it really helps you to see that folks pulled more kids out of more people were interested in homeschooling their younger children, those in first, second, third, fourth grade, than they were in homeschooling the upper grades. So you'll see here that this is enrollment by grade in schools with 5 or fewer students. So this is single-family homeschoolers filing a private school affidavit. This is the breakdown by their grade. Next, let's look at the enrollment by grade in schools with 6 or more students. This is private schools, larger private schools, 6 or more schools. Not a lot of difference here, but still follows the same pattern a little bit, where you see people pulling kids out, it looks like, in the earlier grades, but in the upper grades you don't see that as much. In public schools you see people pulling kids out in the lower grades, but not as much in the upper grades. Then you see here, you see people pulling their kids out in kindergarten and first grade in 2021, but it doesn't look like from 1819 to 1920 that people were pulling their kids out of charter schools back then. That's something that they're doing more in the 2021 school year out of charters. So that's kind of interesting in those early grades. In the later grades, you see more going to charter schools year over year in the upper grades. So that's the information I have on this, and hopefully that can help you see what's going on with the enrollment here in California. Overall, the student population of the state of California appears to, if you add everything up, if you add up all the students in all types of educational programs in California over the last 20 years even, you see a decrease in student population in California, which is very fascinating. Apparently there's just a downward trend. So that's another element of the data that we're still working on pulling together, and hopefully we'll be able to get some charts and data together to show you that information as well. So far, the information that we're reporting on now comes from the Department of Education, and there's a variety of sources within the Department of Education, various departments that produce the different elements of this data, because there's not one specific department that provides all this data. We have to go to different departments to pull it all together. So that's the Department of Education in California, and we're grateful for their help in getting this information together for us. So that's the data we have for you today, and hopefully that can be helpful to you.